Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Trial Site News interview. I'm your host, Brandon. Today, we'll be talking again to Dr. David Wiseman, Brianne Dressen, and Daniel O'Connor. Dr. David Wiseman is an experimental pathologist with a background in pharmacy, pharmacology, and immunology. His COVID work includes data set analyses that have overturned previously negative studies used to justify public policy regarding hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. He has made over 36 submissions to government bodies, including the FDA, CDC, and NIH, on aspects of COVID-19 safety, efficacy, manufacturing, DNA contamination, and regulation. Brianne Dressen is a co-founder of the COVID-19 called React 19. Ms. Dressen has filed a lawsuit against pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca and trial site consolidator Velocity Clinical Research for breach of contract after suffering severe injuries following participation in a clinical trial. Check out her website at react19.org. Daniel O'Connor is the founder of Trial Site News, and you can read his articles and opinion pieces at trialsitenews.com. Today we'll be discussing the Senate hearing chaired by Ron Johnson called Unmasked, how Biden health officials purposely turned a blind eye toward COVID-19 vaccine safety signals. Dr. Weissman testified at the hearing this afternoon. So, Daniel, I'm going to turn it over to you for the discussion.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate it. And welcome again, Dr. Weissman. Great to see you. Brianne, great to see you as well. I think this is a very important milestone that just happened. There's a significant report, and Senator Ron Johnson, who's been a real advocate for trying to help those that have struggled with the COVID-19 vaccination program and some of the harms that have happened thereafter. Dr. Weissman, could you maybe first just introduce, how this report came together that led to the hearing today?
Sure. So, as you pointed out, the senator has been very, I mean, first among all the senators, interested in any issue to do with the COVID vaccines and so on. And he obviously has been a long time supporter of React 19 and other vaccine injury people. And about a year and a half ago, his staff contacted me to ask me some questions about the FOIA disclosure that had been made to do with one of the methods of safety signal analysis from VAERS called empirical Bayesian data mining. That led to a large piece of work that I published as a preprint back in September. We did an interview with you, Daniel. We did an interview with the React 19 group, showing that signals had gone missing for a variety of reasons, including to do with this phenomenon called masking, which we can explain if you like, and that was very concerning. But to get to the bottom of it further, the senator subpoenaed records from Mr. Kennedy to do with a broad range of subjects, and was given 11 million pages of documents. So his staff has been going through those documents and identifying particular issues, and including this one. And what they identified was a series of emails mainly between FDA officials and some CDC officials as to the deficiencies of the method that was used to screen adverse events within VAERS to determine whether or not the number of reports constitute something significant. Do they constitute what is called a signal? A signal does not prove causality. It just means there's an engine light warning. You need to check your engine light and your engine. It doesn't mean that there's actual causation, but it's a potential risk that they now have to investigate. So about a month ago, the senator put out a letter to Mr. Kennedy detailing some of the findings that they had made at that point as to what exactly the FDA knew, and there was clear indications, clearly in the emails, that that they knew that there was this problem with masking with this kind of analysis, but they didn't want to do anything about it. In today's hearing was preceded by the release of another report, an interim report authored by the senator and obviously with his staff, And there was a release of certain documents associated with it. This is stunning. This is absolutely stunning because what we have in these documents today and this report today is we have someone within the FDA, or now retired, but at that time she was a senior statistician. Her name is Dr. Anna Sharfman, Scarfman. Dr. Anna Sharfman was working in the drug section of FDA. She, 25 years ago or so, was the champion within FDA to bring in this method called empirical Bayesian data mining. That was the method. The mathematical method was invented by someone called Dr. William Muschel, working at Oracle, and then Oracle, Dr. Muschel and Oracle developed the software to actually do the analysis. So Dr. Sharfman was recognized with awards from the FDA for this work. They brought this method into the FDA, and it's a really important piece of work, and that's been sort of the gold standard for many years. What was happening in the early 2021 and even at the end of 2020, Dr. Sharfman, who has intimate knowledge of this, she is, if you will, Dr. Muschel is like the father of the method, and if you will, she's the mother of the method, if you want to use that sort of terminology. Dr. Muschel was running analysis from VAERS and finding that there was a significant problem called masking, where signals that are there are being hidden for a certain reason. It doesn't really matter what the reason is, but they're being hidden. And he, along with some colleagues at Oracle over 10 years ago, developed a modified version of their original method that accounted for masking. And Dr. Sharfman at the FDA was telling the other FDA people within the vaccine group, guys, you need to be using this other method because you're going to lose signals. And she kept on doing this. She kept on providing the analyses to different people within the FDA, and it got all the way up to Peter Marks. She was told, and this is the significant part of it, there are several emails, but one in particular that jumps out. There's two in particular jump out at me. The first one is in connection with her transmittal of a series of signals, 49 signals, of what was described as extreme masking. That includes death, myocardial infarction, dementia, other things. Okay, and she was showing the difference between using the old method and the new method, that you wouldn't see signals with the old method, but you do see them with the new method. And she was transmitting to them, to the other people at the FDA, and saying, I'm astonished that of course you didn't find anything with the old method. I'm astonished that you would. So that got all the way up to Peter Marks, and basically he communicated with his parallel number in the drug section, Patricia Cavalosi, and basically said, we've asked Dr. Sharfman to cease and desist from doing this. I mean, this is absolutely scandalous. So there were more emails. They managed to get a paper out, which I discovered. It's a very obscure paper. I discovered that paper last January, a year ago. And basically, once I discovered that they'd done this, then that helped the investigation. So today's hearing was really the sort of launch, if you will, of this report that Senator Johnson and his staff put out, detailing everything I've just described. This is absolutely scandalous.
So, Dr. Wiseman, if I just may for a second, and again, this is a fascinating story, and we know that you've been involved with a lot of this work. So we want to commend you, first of all, for this, tireless effort you're putting into just trying to get to the truth about, these the vaccines and the whole COVID effort. Now, who said cease desist? Like, we know that there were individuals that were in the FDA that had an opportunity to embrace this very a more sophisticated tool for pharmacovigilance surveillance. Very important. That's why these systems exist, by the way. So the question I have is, was there any individual person that made this request to cease and desist and to to not look into this tool anymore?
Right. So the documents were released this morning, so I didn't have a chance to look at the original source documents, but in the summary document of the senator's report,
Yeah.
the way I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there is an email that is from Peter Marks to the head of the Center for Biologics, to his counterpart, the head of the Center for Drugs, Dr. Cavalosi, saying that something like Dr. Schaffman has been asked to cease and desist from doing these analyses and from basically bothering it. So I can't tell you who it was that wrote the actual email, that signed the actual email that went to Dr. Sharpman. Was it Dr. Marks, or was it someone underneath Dr. Marks? I don't know the answer to that, but it was certainly done with Dr. Marks's full knowledge and agreement, that it should be done. And then by implication, the agreement of the head of the Center for Drugs was obviously agreement. There seemed to be no pushback from them saying, well, of course she can look at it. Why shouldn't she be allowed to do these analyses? As far as I can tell, there was no pushback. So basically, whoever wrote the email, it was either with the permission, but it was certainly after the fact with the the agreement of those two center directors.
So either way, this was happening around March 2021, I believe.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
I want to bring Brianne in now. Brianne had her own interactions with FDA, NIH, and she's put this out, the story about what has happened. But Brianne, could you maybe provide some real world context to this, given your experiences? When was that? And what is the implication that they had all of this discussion and then cease and desist for a tool that was actually far more sophisticated in detecting, safety events?
Well, the people that have been harmed by these products, unfortunately, ended up communicating with, and not unfortunately, but just standard process would have been, hey, I've got a problem with this product. I need to notify the FDA and the NIH and the CDC. And that's exactly what we did. Those of us that were harmed during the clinical trials, as well as the physicians and medical professionals that were on the front line. So we reached out to the NIH. The NIH started a study. We received positive diagnoses. So they confirmed what was going on with us. They treated us there. And we were waiting for them to notify the public of their findings from this important research they were doing. In the same time, we were reaching out to the FDA. We started interacting with Peter Marks, who's the head of biologics, who's exactly who we're talking about here. And he is the guy responsible for communicating any safety signals to the public and to the medical community. That is his job. So we started meeting with him in the fall of 21 through the end of 2022. And in these meetings, he told us over and over and over that they've poured through the data and they just can't possibly find a signal. But then he always added, but we're not denying that this isn't real. Just because we're not identifying a signal doesn't mean that this isn't happening. So we kept pushing him to, even if you're not finding a signal, you need to acknowledge and communicate this and give the medical community a heads up, to which he never did. So the public continued to insist that we didn't exist. The social media companies kept censoring us, insisting that we didn't exist, that we were misinformation. And this whole time, we were having meetings with Peter Marks behind closed doors, where he was acknowledging us privately, yet still couldn't somehow find where we were in this sea of data that they had. He described over and over and over these robust data sets. So,
and that was going on for not just from March 2021, but into 2022, right? Some of those meetings that you were having, Bree, went into end of sort of 2022. Is that right?
Yeah, December of 22 is when he stopped talking to us, because I think both of us realized that these meetings weren't going anywhere.
So, Brianne, and I know you may have to step out in a minute and hopefully come back in, but
Yeah.
real quickly, Brianne, what's very important for any kind of future further investigation is that there was awareness that the existing tool was masking quite a bit of the signal. And so that knowledge was there when you started to interact with Dr. Marks. So I think this adds to a preponderance of evidence potentially that there is knowledge and there were some behaviors that were not what was supposed to happen. Let's just put it to you like that.
Right.
There probably were some ways to manage this differently. I mean, and while we were meeting with him, there were more and more people that were finding us and were begging for help, right? So in some of these meetings, I literally have tears rolling down my cheeks as I'm begging the FDA to acknowledge even one or two very simple things. Because I know the lives that would have been saved. I know the severe degree of permanent disability that could have been prevented, because acknowledgement leads to medical care, which leads to better clinical outcomes. Lack of acknowledgement leads to poor clinical outcomes, because there is no medical care for something that nobody can recognize in the medical system. And that then leads to, in many cases, it has led to death. But I'll be back in a bit.
Thanks. We look forward to having you back.
The one, I mean, Bree and the React 19 put out a few months ago, a number of the videos of the meetings with Dr. Marks, and I think there were several transcripts. I mean, they're all pretty memorable. One way or the other, he or Dr. Nair, who was often with him, said, "Oh, we can't find a signal for this. We can't find a signal for that. We can't find a strong association." All these sort of statistical words that no one understands. But the one that really, I think, jumps out at me more than anything else is a comment from Dr. Nair saying that Dr. Marks had instructed him to leave no stone unturned in looking for these signals. Right? I mean, to leave no stone unturned.
So a question, I just want to anticipate, the mindset at the time while Brianne's out, and we can focus on some of the science of masking and why the group in the FDA would not readily incorporate such a tool to help improve safe outcomes. That's the whole goal here, is safety, right?
Right.
One. So if we look at, first of all, this tool, and we have read and heard some discussion of, well, is it a valid, quote unquote, validated tool? And hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Do we want to stop using one tool and use another? Is it an either or? From your experience, Dr. Wiseman, in a biomedical research environment, because remember, these products are still investigational. They're still investigational.
You mean the vaccines?
Yeah, it's under EUA and it's investigational. Okay.
No, well, actually, that's not the EUA. Doesn't mean investigational, but it's something like it. But technically, it's not investigational. But when the EUA was sort of announced that they were going to go that path, even though it's not technically investigational in the same way as a clinical trial kind of situation. Dr. Doron Fink, in the meeting in October, I think it was 2020, said to the VRBPAC meeting, in explaining, what the regulatory pathway is going to be, right. These products are going to be, I think he used the word investigational, but it's not. It's actually not precise. But okay,
I'm going to actually counter argue. Under an EUA, and we can make a friendly bet. A product under EUA that has not been approved remains investigational. That's the reality.
We can argue that, but I think it's not the main point here. Essentially, it was investigational. Was it technically investigational? No, it wasn't technically investigational, but essentially it was. Okay. Okay, but that's a really fine, very fine point, and I know there are other people who argue with that. So I don't want to go down that path because it's really not the main point here. But
Understood.
but the what was the main point? What were we
Well,
talking about?
the main point is validation. So
Oh, validation. Right, right,
no,
right,
no.
right. Thank you.
Remember,
Okay, okay, okay.
it's
So
about risk. It's about risk.
right.
It's
Okay.
about safety. Risks.
Right.
Safety,
Okay.
risk.
Fine. Okay. So in these various documents that we've seen, there's one email in particular from the release that was about a month ago. Again, this is from Dr. Nair, who is sort of by that time sort of in charge of these sort of systems. Sort of. I'm not sure his exact title, but he's writing. There's a whole bunch of discussion that's going on about masking, and he's writing to, I think, principally CDC people,
Mm-hmm.
and he's saying, well, we are aware of this problem. We're aware of the problem with the software both before COVID, and basically we've decided that it's not a good idea. And I'm paraphrasing this, so you're going to have to read the exact words. It's not a good idea to do this in the pandemic, to use these new unvalidated or possibly unvalidated systems. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Okay, so
Right.
is he saying that we can't validate them, or is he saying that it's just not a good idea to do it? Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
you can read it one of two ways. So let's go the it's not a good idea to do it route. Okay,
Right.
it's ridiculous. If you know your system isn't working, right, you've got to do something about it. It's that simple. You don't keep doing it if it's wrong. And even if that other system that Dr. Schaffman was talking about was validated, wasn't validated, the FDA had other ways of dealing with this. Okay, and in fact, in the documents we see one of them in the documents that were released today. It talks about that another person within the FDA, his name is Dr. Menshik, who had at one point been in charge of these analyses. And this must have been in sort of response to what they were getting from Dr. Schaffman. What he did, he did a special run, or I think they called it a special project run, some words like that, with the company, with the contracting company that was actually doing the work on the computer. I think their name was Commonwealth, the Commonwealth company, I'm not sure the exact name. Okay, but rather than do the regular analysis, which they were doing anyway, he asked them to do a special analysis. We don't have all the details of that, but it seems like what he did was say, okay, use the same tool that we're doing, right, but adjust it by taking out. Let's say we're just going to look at Pfizer. We can take out all the other COVID vaccines one at a time and do COVID versus everything else, but no COVID vaccines. Then we'll do the same thing for Moderna, the same thing again for Janssen. It's a bit tedious, but it's certainly doable. And you're using the quote unquote validated method, system. All you're doing is you're doing an experiment that doesn't require any validation. But he seems to have done it. And in the documents, it said he found that there was a muted effect, or that there was some evidence of muting, meaning masking. Okay, we don't have those data. We'd like to see them, but they could have dealt with it this way. Now, maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was certainly been an improvement on whatever there was before. But he found it using the standard method, but just adjusting what it was they actually tested.
So, Dr. Wiseman, this is an important question, and if you already answered it, forgive me, I didn't quite pick it up. But when the doctor introduced the Oracle-based tool,
yeah,
that that was more sensitive and could mitigate some of the impacts of masking. Okay,
right.
Were the FDA principals involved cognitive, aware of the limitations of the existing system?
Right. So there was in the report today, there's a timeline that Senator Johnson and his staff put out, and the beginning of the timeline was, I think it was November, December 2020. Where Dr. Schaffman has organized some kind of meeting within the FDA, including the people in the vaccine, section, that to advise them that, okay, guys, you're about to launch this vaccine, you better watch out. this is the method to use. Now that was December 2020. Just to put that in a time frame context, in January, the end of January 29th, obviously you've got the changeover of the administration, but January the 29th, 2021, there was a standard operating procedure that was published by the jointly, I guess, by the FDA and the CDC, that defined how they are actually going to do this signal analysis. And it defined a number of methods, but for this purpose, what we're talking about today, it said we're going to use two main methods. One is this empirical Bayesian data mining, meaning the quote unquote old system.
Yes.
And FDA are going to do it. And the CDC are going to use a different method, which is sort of the same, but a little bit different, but in the general same category of analysis, called the PRR method. It's called the proportional reporting ratio, and CDC was going to do that. Okay, so apparently, according to the timeline that the senator and his staff released today, that Dr. Sharfman was already telling the FDA, even before the vaccines were launched, that there's going to be a problem. Okay, so that starts it off there.
Now, and we need to understand that if the FDA has at that time a standard operating procedure, a policy, or a standard operating procedure to factor such information into any decision. In other words, they're getting ready to do a mass implementation of a novel product.
Right.
Here's an expert. This is why she's there.
Right.
Introducing the fact that the current approach has significant limitations.
Right.
And this is December 2020. Yeah. So it will also be interesting to understand in further investigation, what are the policies and procedures for such a situation? Should the FDA have, was there a policy or procedure that basically should have prompted them to incorporate that approach right at that time? We don't know.
Well, I mean, I wasn't at the meeting. I don't know the exact contents of the meeting, but clearly she knew enough. And I, again, it's not clear in the documents, but she has a very close relationship with Dr. Michel. I imagine, I don't know that, but I imagine that she's talking to him all the time. And remember, the software that the FDA are using is made by Oracle. So Bill Michel works for Oracle. The software is not cheap. I mean, it's like $100,000 per license. Now, presumably FDA gets some kind of deal on the matter. But let's say it's I don't know, $50,000 or whatever it is. And they've got 20 user licenses or 100. I don't know what it is. Okay. Yeah. So she's not talking to anyone. She's talking to the quote unquote father of the method, but he also works at Oracle. And I mean, Oracle presumably they're already selling this product. The product, this new method, is already sort of incorporated as a feature somehow or another, right? Presumably they don't want to produce shoddy software. They want to produce very high quality software, and they want to make sure it's being used correctly, right? Yeah, so it's not just they're talking to any random person, right? There's a lot of players with skin in the game here, right? So they've already identified that this could be a problem, but perhaps they didn't realize how big of a problem it was going to be until Michel is starting to run these analyses almost from the beginning, it seems. Right, we see that in this paper that they produced, the one I discovered a year and a half ago, that from 2022, hidden in the appendix, they've looked at the VAERS data every other week, I think it is, from January 2021 to October 2021, right? And I wasn't clear as to whether he did this in retrospect or if he was doing it sort of in real time, and it seems like he was doing it pretty much in real time. And looking at what was going on, and then by March, as you say, he was telling Dr. Sharfman, who was then going back to her ex-friends, or about to be ex-friends at FDA, and saying, "Guys, I told you about this in December. This is what's happening."
Look, I think that there is mounting evidence, thanks to this very large dump of documentation. And I think we need to acknowledge some people that are involved with this effort. Again,
Sure.
yourself, Dr. Wiseman, have worked tirelessly. I've seen you at it for some years now, and I think it's
Thank you.
extremely important, the work you're doing. Also, of course, Brianne, who had to step out.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm back.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we also have to acknowledge there's other groups out there that are litigating and getting FOIAs and
Well, remember the original FOIA, that I was able to go through with these Bayesian data mining, that came out of, I believe it was the ICANN efforts through Aaron Siri to obtain those records from FOIA, and it wasn't without a fight. I mean, they had to put up a fight, and I think they had to go to court or whatever they were doing. So it wasn't like, please send us the records. Oh, here you are. They had to fight over it, and it took a couple of years. So that was a lot of effort, and we certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, no, the Aaron Siri, Elizabeth, his colleague.
Right.
Elizabeth is the FOIA queen.
Yeah. So
and Surya
Bremerton.
Arby is the other. He's the FOIA prince, I would say. If you
Okay.
guys don't know Surya, you know Surya, but they sued the FDA 4 years ago for these exact documents, and they could not get them.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
I have to say, we also have to think. Secretary Kennedy has had, I think, a challenging time trying to get the reform I think that is needed. But
Right.
I do believe that Secretary Kennedy, helped facilitate the ability for Senator Johnson to be able to get these 11 million documents.
Yeah, absolutely. And Senator Johnson repeated that, a number of times. He played that same. Yeah.
So now that Brianne's back, I really want to talk about what we need to do moving forward, because we've got a lot of people that are harmed, and they need help. And this hearing, the hearing has opened up more doors. Brianne, just thinking strategically, what are some next steps from your standpoint, patient advocacy research, to be able to mobilize all the folks that are continue to work hard to try to help improve this situation?
It's a good question, because there's what do we do moving forward, and there's what do we do for the people that were harmed from this particular circumstance. And moving forward, I think that there are multiple avenues for improvement. Obviously, the VAERS system, even everyone within government themselves have shown that the VAERS system has problems, and they've wanted to have that reworked for a long time. But then there's also this new, not so new, analysis system that they can use and they should use. There's rumors that there is going to be a Lyme vaccine coming out soon, and if they're applying the same methods and the same process for identifying signals that they have in the past, there are some concerns that there will be some people that will fall through the cracks. So I think it's a good opportunity for the FDA to look at the mistakes of the past and figure out how to ensure that those mistakes don't happen again. But then also the FDA really, really, really does need to take a look at the mistakes of the past, because those people are still living very sickly in bodies that are not functioning. These are people that I talk to every single day. There's someone that just put in a request today to see if we could help her get to Switzerland for assisted suicide. It's relentless, the level of suffering that we've expected these people to endure, just because, there's some inconvenient truths hiding there in the shadows. So let's do right by the science. Let's do right by the people in the United States, and let's evaluate what the existing data is, acknowledge those side effects, reassure the public of what they're getting, give them proper informed consent, and then also give the medical teams tools so they can then treat these adverse events when they do appear. Because they just randomly pop into people's doctor's offices. They're not prepared. They don't know what it is that they're looking at. but there are protocols that can help reduce the severity of these conditions.
So, and Brianne, just quickly on that, React 19 has accumulated a database of over 4,000 studies. Now, albeit many of them are case series and some observational studies, but it's pretty striking the amount of data out there. As far as taking that data that your organization has accumulated and interfacing with the signals that are surfacing from this report, that's a very important area. I'm hoping that, React 19, the federal government, maybe academia can collaborate on. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no better expert in these issues than the people that are living with it themselves. And what separates this from the previous, vaccination programs is these were adults that were hit, right? So we're able to articulate better what's going on. But these are also scientists, doctors, right? Like people that are medically trained, scientifically trained, that have been hit. So it's unfortunately it's the perfect storm, but it's also the perfect environment to be able to team up with the patients to ensure that these types of signals are identified and that they are addressed appropriately.
It makes complete sense to me. Dr. Wiseman, in terms from your vantage, what's been uncovered so far? What are the next lines of inquiry that you believe are most important or that are high priority?
I mean, there are several. I mean, and obviously, we have all the vaccine injured heart, and again in today's hearing, the senator on many occasions, he didn't miss an opportunity to drive that point home, that we've really got to look after the vaccine injured and address their needs and so on and so forth. But I think I haven't had a chance to go through all the new data yet, but I think there is just publishing those signals that we know that the FDA had from Dr. Schaafman and Dr. Dumichel. I think that's going to be just an important somewhat of a reinsurance step. But then we're going to have to use that, or Bree is going to have to use that, or hopefully be able to use that to help assure the people in her group, and then get to the people who they really need to get to, is the people who are treating those patients who don't want to be made, who don't want to do it publicly. Apparently, this is all done underground because doctors are still afraid that if they sort of breathe a word about treating vaccine injured, and Bree, jump in here because we had this conversation earlier. Why should you have to do all this underground? So this is a really one major area. The second major area, obviously, is we at least understand that the center director level people at the FDA knew about this. Were people above that aware of this? And again, it's not just going on in March 2021 in the time frame that Bree was and her friends were going to the NIH. This was going on throughout, the summer of 2021, which is when the accelerated push to get the full approval of the Comirnaty was going on, and the whole controversy that we know about with the doctors Gruber and Krauss being sort of pressured to get it done. So this really casts, a lot of questions about, about that approval process. Anna Schaafman and Bill Dumichel are showing signals for death and myocardial infarction. And basically, this is being covered up. I mean, I don't think there's another way of saying it. It's being covered up.
I will just, I'll interject here that just today or yesterday, a gentleman, David Morenz, was indicted on charges of conspiracy, and destruction and alteration and falsification of records. And we're not saying that's what happened here, but we do have a situation where it's a very serious and grave matter that safety information is being essentially suppressed or and so we do need to better understand what were the mindsets, the intentions of what was unfolding there, because there was a big push to get everything done and get everybody vaccinated. But we always have to remember patient safety, always, right? We can never.
Right.
So I'm just supporting your last point.
Yeah, and you know, we spoke last night, Daniel, about you know the provisions in the law, and I'm not a lawyer, you're the lawyer, and you know you can figure out all the legal, you know, what's criminal or what's not criminal, or any of the other words that you lawyers use. But as a scientist and as a pharmacist, someone who, you know, I've interacted with patients, you know, there's a fundamental, you know, human right that people have to have full informed consent with regard to medical treatment if they're participating in any way in any kind of experiment, you know, of any kind. And you know, and this was a kind of an experiment going back to our earlier, you know, little discussion a moment ago. That the EUA requirements say that the secretary for the HHS has to make sure that doctors who are giving these vaccines are informed about the risks and potential risks of these products. Not only that, the patients who are to whom those products are being given have to be notified. Okay. Now, whether, you know, there's some legal loophole, you know, that says all this stuff didn't violate any laws. Okay. I have no idea about that. Okay, but I do know, as I'm looking at what my responsibility as a scientist, or if I was a doctor or a pharmacist or whoever it was, you know, clearly I have to give informed consent to the best of my knowledge. And if I'm being deprived as a doctor of essential knowledge that there are signals, even though we don't have to prove, even though there's no causality yet, the signal of a potential adverse event or potential safety issue was something that had to be disclosed. Okay. And they're using all these wiggle words. They're using the word statistic of disproportional reporting, signal, potential, association. It sounds like a bad Jackie Mason piece. You know, it's not exactly a signal. It's a potential signal. It's adjacent to a signal. You know, it's a Jackie Mason piece here that's going on here.
I think
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's been painful for me to having worked with industry on this exact topic for a couple decades almost. What's painful, and what's really we need to ask ourselves: are these systems built to detect risk, or are they built to manage perception? And there's a fundamental difference, obviously, and the first one is right, and the second part or the latter is wrong.
Well, that's a very good. So again, it's like anything. If you use it, you can use it one way, or you can use it another way. So the system could be used to really manage risk and really understand it. Okay, and if the right disclosures are there, fine. On the other hand, you look through the pharmacovigilance literature and all the different standards and guidelines. There's a lot of stuff in there that's sort of starting to look a bit like, well, we want to make sure we look like we're doing something, but really we're not. There is a perception there. But here's the other thing with this Bayesian data mining. The problem is you need very expensive software. You need to have some training in doing it. And there's a lot of other black hole stuff that we didn't even talk about how it actually gets set up and what the settings are and so on, how it gets fine-tuned, who exactly does that. That's all behind a big curtain. So it's very non-democratic in that sense. So one of the reforms might be that the FDA have to have a feature on the VAERS website or something where it actually will calculate and show what the current empirical Bayesian geometric mean is. Or whatever it is, so that people can see there's 25 reports for a particular adverse event. Yeah, what is that trending as a as a signal that needs to be there. Now, if you do the other analysis, the PRR, they can also do that as well. But you can actually do that. I mean, with a reasonable knowledge of Excel and not too sophisticated knowledge of maths, anyone can pretty much do that. But there again, it's still a pain. I think a transparency issue should be that for any adverse event that shows up, there's a little box on the VAERS, Wonder system that allows you to display or to view what the current, Bayesian data mining statistics are or the PRR statistics are. So I think that's all in the area of transparency and informed consent. I think that would be a really, really important contribution.
Well,
it's,
go ahead,
I
Brian.
think I can't emphasize enough how important it is to take this opportunity to address these issues because, like, I signed up in the clinical trials, right? I was all in. I wanted to advance the science. I still believe in the scientific method and the process, unearthing the data, whether it's convenient or not, right? But just like you alluded to before, when we integrate politics into science, obviously science is going to lose every single time, right? And in that process, it's everyday Americans that are going to lose every single time. So
Right.
we do need to take a step back, look at what the heck we've been doing, stop racing forward with lightning speed on all of this stuff, and think about how can we improve. And it's insane to think that we just went through this once in a lifetime pandemic, right? And there are lots of things that need to improve, but for some reason, we can't even look to improve even one of those things. Like I naively believed that when I enrolled in that clinical trial, that my information would be collected objectively and then it would be disseminated, whether it was good or bad, right? It was just part of the process. Adverse events is just part of science. There is no product out there that is not going to result in some adverse events. So get the politics out of it, get the capitalism out of it, get back to really good, reasonable science, and let's bring confidence back to these health agencies once and for all.
That's a perfect conclusion to this episode of Trial Site News. I want to thank Brianne. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing for so many people. I've been privileged to help support you with React 19. It's been amazing what you've built, and you continue to run to help other people. Dr. Wiseman, thanks for all the work you're doing continuously. Unearthing all of these data points that have, in this case, led to an actual report and hearing. So kudos to you, Brandon.
And Daniel, don't forget that you guys have been at the forefront of this as well. I mean, Trial Site News. I just want to put that little vote of confidence in there, a little plug for you, because you've supported all this in a variety of ways. Some that are publicly known. There's a few that are not publicly known. But thank you, Daniel.
Oh, it's an honor and a privilege. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Brandon, any final thoughts?
No, I've just really enjoyed having a front row seat on this great discussion tonight about the hearing. So with that, we will wrap this another episode. And for unbiased news and opinion articles and the latest in scientific research, please visit trialsitenews.com. Also follow us on YouTube, Rumble, and X.